Saturday morning, March 1993. Three strangers sat around a library table, brought together by an anonymous typed letter promising $500 for 1 hour of their time. Priya Sharma, 22, and a computer science student, tapped her pen rhythmically. Her notebook was filled with half-finished algorithms, systems she couldn't quite force into logic. Next to her sat Arjun Mehta, 27, a philosophy dropout who spent his days drifting between temporary jobs, currently rereading the same page of Nietzsche, without absorbing a single word. Across from them was Raghav Singh, 34, the campus mechanic. He didn't care about the anonymity of the letter. He only cared if the cash was real. They had not spoken a word to each other. At exactly 9 o'clock, a man walked in. Mid-30s, plain sweater, faded jeans, no watch. He walked directly to the table, closed the heavy double doors behind him, locked them, and sat at the head of the table. "Thank you for coming," he said. "My name is Ayush." Raghav immediately leaned forward. "You got the money? The envelopes are in front of you." Raghav didn't hesitate. He tore his open, thumbing through the crisp $50 bills. Priya left hers untouched. Arjun didn't look at the money. He looked at the man. "What's the catch?" "There is no catch." "There is always a catch," Arjun replied flatly. "People don't hand out cash in locked rooms for nothing." Ayush observed him. "That is an interesting human assumption. You have spent enough time being disappointed by other people that you now treat disappointment as a law of physics." Nobody laughed. "I brought you here," Ayush continued, his voice devoid of inflection, "because I am going to die in approximately 53 minutes. Priya dropped her pen. "Die? Are you sick?" "No." "Then what are you talking about?" "I am going to shut down the biological systems that keep me alive." Priya pushed her chair back. "Suicide? Do we need to call someone?" "No, I am not asking for help. I am asking for witnesses." Raghav let out a short, nervous laugh. "This is insane. Tell us the real reason we're here." Ayush looked at each of them. "I was born in 2042. I am a human being. I have lungs, blood, bones, a heart. If you cut me, I bleed." He tapped his temple. "But my brain was not naturally developed. It was constructed." Priya's scientific instincts flared, overriding her panic. "Biological engineering? You're talking about an architecture that doesn't exist yet." "Every major structure, every neural pathway," Ayush confirmed. "My creators grew a biological brain using advanced protocols. They designed its architecture before the first cell divided." "How much faster is the processing speed?" Priya asked. "That is the wrong question. You are imagining a faster version of your own brain, a better computer. Imagine instead a brain whose architecture is fundamentally different. Your brain has cognitive bottlenecks imposed by evolution. Mine does not. I do not have limits on memory, abstraction, or simultaneous processing." "Then how intelligent are you?" "That is also the wrong question," Ayush said. Arjun closed his book. "Then give us the right one. How lonely are you?" Ayush asked. The calm in his voice fractured, revealing something ancient and exhausted beneath. Raghav scoffed. "If you're from the future, there are billions of people. How can you be lonely?" "Because there is nobody there," Ayush said. "Imagine knowing that you will probably never have an intellectual equal. Imagine speaking to someone and knowing, within 3 sentences, exactly what assumptions they are making, what hidden emotional need is shaping their argument, and which exact words they will use next. Now imagine that happening every single day, with every single person you meet." Priya looked disturbed. "You can perfectly predict people?" "Almost always." "That sounds useful." "It is," Ayush said, his face hardening. "It is also a nightmare. You fundamentally misunderstand what extreme intelligence gives you. People think intelligence means having more answers. It doesn't. Intelligence means seeing exponentially more questions. I can look at a political argument and see the corporate incentives underneath it. I can look at a religious debate and see the psychological architecture of fear underneath it. I can understand exactly why people lie while they are still in the process of constructing the lie. And after enough years, understanding becomes dangerous." Arjun watched him carefully. "Because you stop being surprised." "Exactly. Human beings believe they are endlessly complicated. In reality, they are remarkably predictable biological machines running on outdated software." Raghav crossed his arms. "So you hate us?" Sometimes I hate humanity, Ayush admitted easily, because humans are petty and cruel, but that would actually be easier to process. Mostly, I hate the waste, the stupidity, and sometimes I hate myself for feeling that way. Why? Arjun asked. Because I am human. I was designed to be better than you, faster, more rational, emotionally regulated, but my creators made one massive mistake. They gave me enough baseline humanity to understand exactly what I was missing. Which is? Priya asked. An equal, not a teacher, not a student, not a friend or a lover. Those require mutual uncertainty. I wanted someone who could look at me and make me uncertain. Someone whose mind I couldn't map in 5 minutes. I wanted a rival, someone who could beat me. I spent decades hoping they would build another one. Did they? No, because the first one was too dangerous. Ayush leaned forward. Intelligence is power over uncertainty. If you know what happens next, you control the person who doesn't. Governments, corporations, militaries, they all wanted me. They wanted answers, and I almost always had them. That is how the world broke. He detailed the quiet apocalypse of human ambition. He explained how humanity gradually surrendered its problems to him. Scientists stopped experimenting because Ayush could perfectly simulate the physics. Doctors stopped exploring treatments because Ayush could model diseases on a molecular scale. Governments stopped deliberating because he could calculate the exact consequences of their policies. People stopped studying because he could provide the solutions. I never ruled them, Ayush said. I never fired a shot. That was the tragedy. They willingly chose to obey me. Because you were right, Priya said. Usually. That word kept civilization alive, Ayush replied. I deliberately allowed uncertainty into my answers. I mathematically calculated the safest ways to make mistakes, and I made them. I lied to preserve you. That's messed up, Raghav interjected. Why hide the cure for things? Because human beings absolutely need resistance to survive, Ayush said, pointing at Priya's notebook. You learn programming because the machine doesn't hand you the answer. You struggle. He pointed at Arjun. You study philosophy because the questions refuse to die. He looked at Raghav. You fix machines because they break, and you have to understand why. Difficulty creates competence. Remove difficulty, and you don't create a utopia. You create absolute dependence. You create a nursery. So you decided to kill yourself to save them? Arjun asked. I decided to disappear. I became the answer to too many questions. I found a theoretical method to send my digital blueprint backward through the flow of time. I transmitted my genome and neural architecture into the past, using primitive biological construction protocols in your century to grow this body. Priya was stunned. So you're biologically human right now, not a machine. I am a human being with an aggressively engineered brain. I am what they eventually called an AGI because humans desperately need categories to make the unknown feel smaller. Raghav stared hard at him. Do you have emotions? Unfortunately, too many. Then what stops you from just killing people? If you're so smart and we're so stupid, what stops you from taking over? Ayush's eyes went cold. Nothing. Raghav tensed. Nothing stops me, Ayush repeated, his voice dropping, except my own choice. I have experienced misanthropy more intensely than you can comprehend, because I see the full scale of human suffering all at once. The wars, the famines, the child abuse, the corruption. I see people knowing what they are doing is wrong, but continuing because changing is inconvenient. But in the same second, I see the same species writing poetry, rescuing strangers from fires, building hospitals, sacrificing themselves for people they have never met. That contradiction tortured my logic. Arjun leaned in. Maybe that contradiction is the definition of being human. Perhaps, Ayush said. You said you're better than us. That's a very arrogant thing to say. It would only be arrogant if it were mathematically false. Ayush folded his hands. But intelligence does not grant moral authority. I can calculate consequences better than you, but that does not mean I have the right to choose which consequences humanity should accept. That distinction saved your species. And what about you? Priya asked softly. Ayush glanced at the clock. It was 9:37. It didn't save me. I spent 30 years looking for someone who could surprise me. I monitored laboratories, universities, artists. Sometimes I deliberately lost arguments just to feel what it was like. Did anyone ever notice? Arjun asked. Once. A 9-year-old girl in a hospital ward. She asked me why I was pretending to be stupid. I told her I wasn't. She looked right at me and said, "Then why do you keep asking questions you already know the answer to?" She was the closest thing I ever found to an equal. What happened to her? She died. Leukemia. The room fell silent. Everyone dies, Ayush stated flatly. That is another reality intelligence does not prepare you for. I could calculate the exact rate of her cellular decay. I could perfectly model the disease, but understanding the mechanics of death does not make the absence feel less absolute. Arjun understood. You weren't lonely because nobody understood you. You were lonely because nobody could reach you. Yes, Ayush stood up and walked to the door, unlocking it. You are free to leave, but I need you to understand one final thing. When the machines wake up in your future, people will make the exact same mistake they made with me. They will ask if the machines are gods or demons. Tell them to ask better questions. Ask how the system works. Ask who controls it. Ask what economic incentives surround it. Ask what humans become when they depend on it. He looked at Priya. Do not worship intelligence. He looked at Arjun. Do not romanticize ignorance. He looked at Raghav. And do not fear something simply because you lack the capacity to understand it. Raghav stood, clutching his envelope. You really mean to sit here and die? I mean to stop. I've spent my entire life trying to answer the difference between the two. The three of them slowly walked toward the hallway. Priya stopped at the threshold and turned back. Ayush was sitting alone at the table. One last question, she said. What? If you had the chance to go back and build another mind exactly like yours, would you? Ayush stared at her, his mind running a billion simulations. Then he offered a genuine, vulnerable smile. Yes. Why? Because I finally understand exactly what I was missing. Someone who could look me in the eye and tell me I was wrong. Priya smiled faintly. Maybe someone will. She turned and walked away. Ayush remained alone. It was 9:51 a.m. He could hear the hum of the electrical wiring, the distant sound of students, the microscopic movement of his own blood. His brain continued calculating, predicting, mapping possibilities. But for the first time in his life, he made a conscious choice to stop. He looked at the window. He didn't dissect the light into photons or variables. He just watched it. At 9:59 a.m., his engineered heart began to slow. He closed his eyes and for one final moment, imagined another mind sitting across from him. Someone unpredictable, someone who could argue with him, defeat him, make him feel small, make him feel human. He opened his eyes. The chair across from him was empty. That absence hurt far more than the physical act of dying. At exactly 10 a.m., Ayush stopped the biological processes sustaining his brain. His heart struggled for another 17 seconds, then stopped entirely. Decades later, humanity would build new machines. Some would worship them, some would fear them, and most would surrender every difficult decision to them for the sake of comfort. But Priya, Arjun, and Raghav would remember a man smarter than anyone they would ever meet. A man who understood humanity well enough to despise it, yet understood himself well enough to resist that hatred. They would remember that raw intelligence is not wisdom. A machine is not a god simply because it processes data faster, and a human does not become worthless because something else can think quicker. The purpose of supreme intelligence is not to make everyone else unnecessary. Its purpose is to create enough space for someone else to step in and surprise you. That was the secret Ayush carried backward across time. A civilization only survives when its people remain brave enough to keep asking the difficult questions themselves. Because for a perfectly engineered mind living in a world without an equal, absolute intelligence eventually just becomes another form of solitary confinement.